Welcome to Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf. Thanks for tuning in this week. I got a special episode, I guess. I don't know. We're going to do something a little bit different today. It's something called Answering the Critics. Answering the Critics is what I'm going to call it. I need to find some echo to put behind that. So as I usually say, I don't know if I always say it, I like to have people who may understand the material that I'm covering better than I do. You know, you can write in on the comments and tell me where I'm getting it wrong or whether you agree, whatever you want to write. And that's happened a couple of times. This last one that I did on Materialism's missing piece, I got a couple of really good responses from a couple of folks who I want to go over and read. Now, I'd had something different planned because, look, as I always say, I'm the least credible person talking about any of this stuff. And so my goal in talking about the Sabine video was not to debate materialism with anybody because I'm not qualified. I don't know anything. I mean, I don't know anything, but I just know what I read. My goal was twofold. One was to address the, in my opinion, irresponsible dogma or dogmatic way with which she presented her information. I don't think that that's good for anybody who holds any position where people respect their opinion to become dogmatic. Either the facts support your position, and that should be good enough, or they don't. But it really should be up to individuals to make up their own mind. Okay, so when I'm presenting an issue, I'm not here to convince you to believe one way or the other. It's not my thing. I honestly, listen, I'd like you to believe like I believe because I think I'm right, but that's everybody. So I personally don't care what you believe. That's your business. The goal of the channel here is just simply to encourage independent thinking. So whatever you believe, hopefully you arrive at that particular belief after a survey of all of the data as objectively as possible. And that's very difficult for anybody to do. But at least if you recognize your a priori assumptions, then you can see the data supports my a priori assumption or it does not, which means I either got to change the data or get me a new assumption. And that's really all this is about. So I'm not here to convince you to not be a materialist, just like when I was doing Calvinism. Listen, it seems like a wacky idea to me, but that's just me. And if you think it's the way, God bless you, because I don't think he cares. I don't think God gives a rip, whether you're a Calvinist or not. I'm simply saying, whatever position you are, hopefully you've arrived at that position because you're an independent thinker and you're an active listener and you're getting as much data as you can from whatever side, and then looking at it and go, this either makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And if the data fits in such a way that I need to really question my a priori assumption, then I should question my a priori assumption. And I think there are some people, most people, I don't know, I haven't done any numbers on it, their a priori assumption is just untouchable. Doesn't matter. And so I'm going to fix the data to fit whatever I want to. And here's the thing. I can be accused of doing the same thing. So I'm not saying it's a you and not me kind of a thing. We're all susceptible to that. And I'm simply, the whole goal is you got to keep your mind open. And I thought Sabine was a very poor example of having an open mind or encouraging people to have an open mind. And that was the point. Now, in response to my video, obviously, there was a couple of folks that says, Kev, you know, you've got some work to do. Maybe you don't quite understand it, which is fine. Listen, I admit to that. So what I want to do is, the point is, I was hoping to wrap up the whole materialism thing because it just doesn't interest me that much. It did interest me, you know, over the past several months as I've been reading about it. But typically what I've been finding as I've been doing this is, just like with Calvinism, you know, I started studying Calvinism again because, again, 30 years ago I had heard it and I got, yeah, whatever, I don't want any part of that. But then, you know, recently I heard that there were very intelligent people, well-respected folks who thought it was the thing. And so I had to go, well, let me dig in. Maybe I'm missing something. And it turns out, well, listen, that's just my opinion. But what happens is at the beginning, there's this learning curve, and it's very steep, but that's where all the interest is for me, is getting a hold of these ideas from this side and that side, and there's a side over there, and which one seems to make the most sense. That's the cool thing for me. It's the investigative part I love. But at some point in time, you get to this point where, okay, well, these people are over here and these people over here, and there doesn't seem to be any information that's moving one or the other. And one set of data seems to me to be the clearest that points to a particular topic. And once I'm in that particular place, it starts to get boring, unless there's some new information that I haven't quite considered. And that's why I asked for those comments, is that, listen, there's probably tons of stuff that I just really don't know or haven't considered. So when I'm going over these comments that I really appreciate, I'm just going to give you just my idea of them. But then I thought, you know what? Part of the problem, as I was reading the comments, may be that I'm just yammering too much and I'm not presenting enough people who actually are experts in the field that I'm talking about to present the information. That's probably going to be better. So, so I started collecting data and going back over my notes and going back to some of the things that I'd been going over the past several years. Because, you know, while I was focused on materialism in the last 6 or 7 months, it's never been a focus, but over, you know, as you're just digging through ideas, those kind of things pop up, and I'll save them either on a clip or in a note program. And so as I started to accumulate that stuff and go back over the stuff, it started to get really large. And I don't want to do a 2-hour thing, because for me, it seems to me that there are smarter, better people to give you that information. But what I will do here and next week was just present you with some of the data that I think supports my idea. And here's my idea. I just don't think materialism, while it works for a lot of scientific study, it helped me get all of this cool stuff that I have around me, the computer, my little drum machine over there, and all kinds of stuff that I love, my phone that I'm looking in right now. Fantastic. I just don't think it's a good worldview because it doesn't have the explanatory power. That's just how it seems to me. And some of the ideas that are put forth to try and bridge the gap just seem insufficient. And not just to me. And this is the key. It's not just that I think materialism is a deficient worldview, not a scientific methodology. I think it's a very effective scientific methodology. But as a worldview of how all of existence works, it seems it fails. And there are people on both sides who think the same thing. People who are dualists, like myself, who think the mind is a separate thing that is prior to the material. I don't say prior to, maybe that's not the right way to explain it. But then even materialists or physicalists or naturalists, I'm not sure how you distinguish the three. There's some relationship between them, and I don't know what it is, which, you know, is part of the problem for me. Not part of the problem for me about materialism. Part of the problem as to why I'm not the person to explain it to you, because there are distinctions that I'm just not aware of. I'm not the one to talk about all these things so that you could learn about it. The best I can do is tell you what I know and why I think it's deficient. But there are people who are physicalists, materialists, naturalists, who will tell you it just doesn't work. Materialism is a deficient view. And so that's what I want to show just a little bit today. But next week, I will give you you can listen to the experts, and they'll tell you why it's just what the problems are with materialism. And some would even say, well, I shouldn't say some. I know at least one person who studies this, who says it's a dying field, that fewer and fewer people are trying to hold it together. Not because of the philosophical debate. It's specifically because the science, as they learn more about how the mind works and how the mind works and how the brain works, you can start to see that it's I shouldn't say it. Well, I should say, because that's what it seems to me. It seems to me, that's what I should say. It's impossible that the mind could come from brain activity, or that the brain could produce the mind. Science will tell you this, I think. But you're going to have to hear it for yourself. I'm just telling you what I think. So let's get to the comments. This is, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on one second. I'm going to have to take a quick break. All right. I think I got it here. The first comment is from a young man. I don't know, young man. He could be 12 or 99. I don't know exactly how old they are. But Andrew Ostrovsky is the name. And you know what? Just to make it clear, both of these comments, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I asked for the comments. You guys took the time to write thoughtful comments, even though you think I'm wrong. That's fine. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, because I want to learn what's going on too. If there's something that I'm missing, I want to know what it is. So back to the comments. He says, please consider the phenomena of emergence, something that we'll look at briefly. Some qualities emerge from a substrate that does not manifest them on basic scale. For example, large quantities of sand can display flowing qualities reminiscent of water. In other words, sand grains that are in essence small rocks can behave like water. Rock is not water, but water-like behavior can emerge from rocks. Materialists may believe that spirit-like qualities of human experience can emerge from matter, energy, substrate without causing any contradictions. Now that's the first one. So, you know what, maybe I should read them both, because let me summarize that. So apparently he's dealing with the idea of emergence, and that's a very commonly held idea when the materialist or atheist or someone's talking about the hard problem of conscience and they're not a dualist, will say that the mind, whatever they say it is an emergent property, or it supervenes on the physical, is kind of what they say. I don't think that's a good answer. It seems to me, and I'll be straight up, Andrew seems like he gets this way better than I do, so keep that in your pocket. It just seems to me that to say that something supervenes on or emerges from doesn't really tell you how it's working. What it tells you is that you've got both of them. You know, in this configuration, you get these things. But I think what the materialist, the burden for the materialist is to demonstrate how, not how they just correlate, or that, you know, if you get this, you get this. But they need to show the mechanistic means by which this produces that. And I think that's even a problem with things like liquidity and solidity. You know that molecules in certain configurations are solid, but I think the concept, or what solidity is, I'm not quite sure physics has worked that one out. Not quite sure. Again, don't get mad at me if I've got that wrong, but I think that's the case. And as a matter of fact, I'll play you somebody who echoes that idea, that even the idea of liquidity and solidity, while we all know that things are solid and things are liquid, not quite sure how that happens. But again, I could have that wrong. So my point is, yes, emergence is an idea that you'll hear a lot when you're reading about this thing. But for many, not only dualists like myself, but non-dualists will say that's just not good enough. It just gives a name to the problem to be answered, or the question to be answered. At least that's how they seem. But don't get me wrong, I appreciate the answer. And again, I'm not even telling you that Andrew's wrong. I'm just simply saying I've heard other things from people who say that that's not quite the answer. Let's go to the next one. You know, maybe I should play you the video on emergence. You know, let me do that. So this is a guy named Colin McGinn. And Colin McGinn is, like I referred to, he's not a dualist. I don't think he believes in God or any of that stuff. But here's somebody who seems to think that the answer of emergence doesn't work. See if it works. Hold on.
What is it about the brain which explains why the brain, and only the brain, gives rise to this phenomenal experience that we call consciousness?
Yeah, and the answer would be that at a certain level, it's complexity, because the brain is not just cells; it's tens of billions of cells, and each cell may have thousands, if not tens of thousands, of connections. So the permutations and combinations of all these things are in the very, very high numbers, much more than trillions, thousands of trillions of operations. And in this complexity, you have the emergence of consciousness. So goes the argument.
Yeah, but complexity can't really be the key, because for two reasons. First of all, lots of things are very complex, and yet those things don't have lower degrees of consciousness even. And let's say the kidneys are less complex than the brain. Do they have a degraded or lower form of consciousness? Apparently not. There's no reason to think that. And why should the mere number of connections between neurons generate consciousness, as opposed to generating just lots more connections? We're moving from one kind of thing to another kind of thing, and complexity doesn't seem to bridge the gap at all. And another point about this is that consciousness is actually not that complex in many ways. If you take an ordinary sensation, a sensation of pain, you know, when I put my hand on a hot surface, it's a simple sensation. There may be a very complex biochemical process underlying it, correlated with it, but the sensation isn't complex. So if complexity were the answer, then we'd experience our consciousness as a fantastically complex series of interconnections, but we don't experience it that way. So the way we experience consciousness when we introspect our own awareness presents it in a certain way. The way we experience the brain when we perceive the brain presents the brain in a certain way, and these two seem to be irreducibly different kinds of things. That's why traditionally in philosophy, people have felt tempted by dualism, because they've thought, well, the brain and the mind are very different. And they've noticed, for example, that the mind has got intentionality, which means the ability to be about things other than itself. You have beliefs about things, or you have perceptions of things, emotions towards things. Whereas the brain, as a physical object, doesn't have intentionality. It's just a set of physical connections between things. The mind has struck some philosophers, like Descartes particularly, as a non-spatial entity. So we don't suppose that our thoughts have spatial extent, or they have spatial location, or have any other, or they can be broken down into spatial parts. And yet the brain, the correlates in the brain of our thoughts are spatial entities. So in a number of different ways, you find that when you introspect consciousness, it has a nature which makes it very different from the brain as you empirically investigate the brain. And that's the origin of the philosophical problem, what to say about that disparity and that apparent dualism.
And so you have this is Colin McGinn, not a dualist by any stretch of the imagination, at least it doesn't seem to be, that's not as far as I know. But he brings, he's talking about just a couple of problems that exist for the materialists if they're going to try and explain the mind by just physical matter, and supervene that if you just, if it's configured in a certain way, this sort of supervenes. I don't think that that's the answer. It just simply says, the best that supervene says is, I got the brain and I've got thoughts and ideas and emotions and sensations and first-person experience, and they seem to work together somehow. But emerge doesn't seem to tell you anything about that. That's how it seems to me. So going back to the comments, let's look at the young man. Again, I don't know how old they are, but I'm just used to saying young man. This is Trevor Clokey, if I'm saying it right, and if I'm not saying it correctly, please forgive me. I'm just going to say Trevor from now on. Trevor says, you're correct, you're not understanding materialism or determinism. Or said, you're correct about you not understanding materialism or determinism, and you're definitely misunderstanding Sabine and her attentions too. Maybe. That possibly is the case. Well, at least for the first part, Smart Money says Trevor's right, that I don't understand it. Now, that being said, oftentimes when you're talking about ideas and you're criticizing or, showing some of the questions that you have about somebody's idea and where it may not work out right, one of the answers you commonly get is, well, you just don't understand my idea. Now, again, that could be 100% possible. Now, as far as Sabine's intentions are, I don't know what her intentions are. I have no idea. My criticism is that whatever her intentions are, she's being irresponsible. That's my criticism. Whatever your intentions are, there doesn't seem to be any reason to be so dogmatic about a position that's highly debated. People even in her own camp tell you she's wrong. And to say that if you don't believe it, like she says, if you don't believe it, you'll never understand physics, that's just irresponsible. It doesn't matter what her intentions are. That was my point. Don't even care what her intentions are. Anybody from any perspective, nobody knows enough to be that dogmatic on a topic that so many brilliant people go, we're not quite sure. That's was my criticism. So while you're right, I don't know what her intentions is, and maybe I misunderstand them, I don't really care what her intentions are. It's just that's irresponsible to do that. That's how it seems to me. He goes on. Trevor says, materialists don't actually believe that minds don't exist. This seems to be your first sticking point. The question is the physical nature of the mind. Materialists can believe that minds as emergent phenomena made of energy and particles. Consider ITT, integrated information theory, which is wholly materialist explanation of the mind consciousness. Okay, fine. Now, I appreciate that because I've never heard of integrated information theory. I've heard of information theory, but the integrated thing, I don't even know what that is. And while I'll have to look it up, I'm almost certain I won't understand it. But that's fine. Here's how it seems to me, just on that point. One, materialists don't actually believe that minds don't exist. I think you're correct. And maybe I overstated my opinion. So while different materialists don't believe the mind exists, whatever materialists believe about the mind, it's different depending on the type of materialist you're talking about. For example, eliminative materialists will tell you that there are no such thing as beliefs. Those things, they'll tell you if you look under the hood of the mind, you're not going to find anything like beliefs. And so those things just aren't real. The obvious problem is, well, then, do you expect anybody to believe that? The point is, some people like Sabine say there's no will. Some people like the eliminative materialist says there's no beliefs. Some people like Daniel Dawkins or Sam Harris will say that you have no agency, like Sabine will say. So my point is, whatever the materialist is calling the mind, in my idea, isn't the mind. Because, as I said before, if you've got a mind, you have a will. And if you have a will, you have intentionality. You're able to have knowledge. You're able to make decisions, have beliefs, all of the things that everybody, including materialists, say that we do. Or at least behave like we do. So when I say that there are some materialists that don't even think that the mind exists, I put Sabine in that category. Because again, in my opinion, once you say I don't have a will, everything's gone. There's no use talking about the mind. They're just sensations that you think, that you call thinking, feeling, loving, those kinds of things. Because if you don't have a will, then you're just a robot, seems to me. Now, maybe that's a very simple, blunt way of putting it. Maybe it's not technical and it makes sense, and I understand. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm not going to contend with you on that point, Trevor. I think maybe I did overstate my position on that point. I'm saying that it might be a semantical thing. Because when I hear materialists talking about minds, I don't conceive of that as being a mind. But that could be me. So I don't continue with that first point. The fact that materialists don't actually believe that mind don't exist, I think that you're correct. There are many materialists that do, but they're not the hard, strong materialists. like Sabine seems to be. Seems to be. There are many, I guess, soft materialists who do recognize, just like you heard Colin McGinn say, we have introspection. We have consciousness. There is this thing. Thomas Nagel, I think, would be in that camp. There is consciousness, and materialists will agree. But the problem is they don't know how those work together. That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness, as I understand it. And I don't think emergence or supervene works for that. Here's another one. So here, let's go on in his comments. Your second sticking point is agency / will. Don't attach thoughts or knowledge to that. It muddies your definitions. Now, I'm not sure what Trevor means by that. And to be fair, they're just writing a couple of comments, right? They can't write their own dissertation or go on and on about it like I am. So when I say I'm not sure what he's talking about, I'm not saying that he doesn't have a point. I'm just simply saying he wasn't able to, elucidate and detail as a point in in that particular format. And maybe I should have somebody like that, Trevor, or somebody like that, come on and they can explain their viewpoint better, because it's not. I know that I'm not representing their ideas the way they would, and so I just want to make that clear that it's not a fair thing that I'm doing. As a matter of fact, the reason why I'm doing this is because I was going to just type back in the comments section. But for me to feel like I could fully explain what I mean, listen, it's been an hour already. I don't know how long it's been taken so far, but there was just no way that I could write what I was going to do. Or should I say, as I thought about it, I go, it would take me the same amount of time to just address it in one of these presentations than for me to type it out like that. So I just thought, and I thought more people could be edified by both sides. The point I'm just making is that it's unfortunate that Trevor or Andrew aren't able to explain their side. I'm sure they would do a much better job in explaining their position. So it's really an unfair. It's not, I'm not saying it's unfair, but they're just not able to really elucidate their position. So when I say that I don't understand what he means by muddying the waters, I'm not saying that he doesn't have a point. I'm just simply saying he probably just doesn't have enough space to explain all the things that he wants to explain. Your second sticking point, this seems to be fundamental to your worldview, agency and will. And it is. He's 100% right. I think. Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't even know where to start with explaining it. My best guess might be that agency and choice are viewed as useful illusions by determinists. Agency doesn't actually exist in the materialist view, but materialists acknowledge that it is necessary to pretend that it does for human society to function. Let me just address that point. Now, and as I say, next week, I'll put together some of the material, the videos and the writings that address these issues better. And I'm not, and please understand this, I'm not doing this to hammer on either of these two guys. I mean that. When I say that I appreciate Clark and Andrew for writing in with these viewpoints, I mean that 100%. I'm not saying that I'm right. And the information that I'm going to bring forward isn't to hammer them and say that they're wrong. I'm not even here to debate materialism over dualism. That's not even here for me. I just want you to know that there are other opinions about these things. That's all I want to do. And I want to present you those opinions that can explain it better than me. Because here's my comment on the whole, we have to pretend. So, again, the reason I refer back to Calvinism a lot when I'm talking about materialism and determinism is because both materialism and Calvinism are just, I shouldn't say just, at bottom, it seems they are both just simply deterministic worldviews. And a lot of the conflict that I see is that for the Calvinist and the materialist, you can say that determinism is true, but nobody lives like that. And it's a very inauthentic way to live. And I'm not even sure they believe their theories. let me say that right. I'm not saying they're being dishonest. I'm saying there has to be some cognitive dissonance when you're saying, I know I don't make choices, but I'm going to go get myself a sandwich. Nah, I think I'm going to have a salad instead. But I'm just pretending that. I can't imagine that the most hardened, I don't know, the strongest materialist who thinks that the will and the mind and love and all of these things that I think are real, it's just hard for me to get that in my head. And I'm not saying they're being dishonest. It's just hard for me to, only because when you interact with them, they behave just like you do. The people who think that, yeah, I'm making this decision. Now, to say that they don't believe it, but they act like it's true. It's kind of like if you're going with a friend and you're trying on clothes and they're putting on extra, everything they try is extra large. And they go, wow, you're an extra, you say, wow, you're an extra large. And they go, no, I'm really a small, but I just, wear extra large clothes because they fit better. Okay, that's what that sounds like to me. The idea that materialism is true and we don't have agency and we don't make decisions, which means we're not responsible for the things that we do, good or bad. But we're going to act like we're responsible for the things we do because it works better. Well, maybe just like the person wearing a size extra large shirt, maybe they're an extra large. And similarly, if we act like we have agency and we make choices, maybe we have agency, maybe we make choices. That just might be the way it is. That's how it seems to me. And to have an idea that is problematic even by materialists' own admission, and say that's the way it is, but the thing that seems the way it is isn't the way it is, we're just going to pretend like the way it is, it just seems like too much work to hold up a bad idea. What seems like a bad idea to me. It just seems like you're working too hard for that. And for me, I'm going to shop someplace else. I'm going to shop for a place where I can find an idea that purports to be true and actually maps onto the real world. And I can behave like it's real. That's the one I'm going for. For the Calvinist, for the materialist, the idea that, hey, yeah, you think you make decisions, but you really don't. Listen, you can have that. Again, I'm not mad at you. I mean that. I'm going to go for an idea that says I do make decisions because that's how it seems. Because here's another problem, it seems to me. And I know I'm doing all the talking, but next week, listen, you're going to get all the experts next week. If I have to, the same cognitive faculties that I use that tell me that I'm making decisions are the same cognitive faculties that I use to listen to your theory of how I'm not doing that. And you're really asking, the materialist is really asking you to make a decision that when your cognitive faculties tell you these things that seem really, really real, you're not supposed to believe them because they conflict with materialism. But all of the things that support materialism, those are the things that are real. And then your cognitive faculties are working perfectly. So when they disagree with materialism, you shouldn't trust your cognitive faculties, but act like it's true. But when it's materialism, your cognitive faculties are working 100%, and you should act, but still don't act like it's true. It's just too much. It's too convoluted and too counterintuitive to me. That's another reason why I reject that idea. Let's look at, here's something from, let me see if I can find this. Hold on one second. Okay, this is from reasonablefaith.org, Dr. William Lane Craig's excellent page where I get a whole bunch of my information from. This is a Q&A on determinism, just in general. Here's the question. It's question number 564, Calvinism and the unlivability of determinism. That says, I wanted to thank you for your podcast debates. Hold on, let me see which film found enjoy them. Okay. One of the most powerful apologetic arguments against naturalism, atheism, and so on is the idea that nobody strives to be a consistent naturalist, atheist, etc. In other words, They fail to act in accordance with the nihilism to which many of these ideas logically lead. Being more than a little curious, I stumbled into the free will position with Calvinism. Doesn't this lead to a similar problem? In other words, what exactly does a consistent Calvinist even look like? So the point of that, if I didn't mention it already, is that Calvinism, like materialism, at bottom is a deterministic worldview if you are the strong version of them. Again, Calvinism, like materialism, tons of different variations of them, like there are in any idea. Any idea, you're going to have different people who have different ideas. So there's nothing wrong with an idea because you have different stronger and weaker versions of it. That's not the problem. But typically, you're more stronger Calvinist, the more stronger materialist, like Sabine seems to be. You fall right into determinism. And again, listen, this is just me. It's got to be one of the dumbest ideas in philosophy is determinism, if for the only reason that nobody acts like it's true. And it just seems to me if you have an idea that you're saying is true, but you don't act like it, then it's probably not a good idea, seems to me. So that's why the Calvinism and materialism are put into the same camp for anybody who may have a problem with that there. Let me finish here. So Dr. Craig, in his response, says, I think you've successfully identified a problem with determinism in general. Let me see, Leaf? Oh, Leaf, that's his name. Of which Calvinism is but a specific instance, given the Calvinist view that God determines everything that happens. Okay, again, Calvinists think God determines everything that happens. Certain stronger Calvinists and certain strong materialists think that the Big Bang, like Sabine, that determines everything. So it's basically the same idea. A determinist cannot live consistently as though everything he thinks and does is causally determined, especially his choice to believe that determinism is true. Thinking that you're determined to believe that everything you believe is determined produces a kind of vertigo. Nobody can live as though all that he thinks and does is determined by causes outside himself. Even determinists recognize that we have to act as if we have free will, and so weigh our options and decide on what course of action to take, even though at the end of the day, we are determined to take the choices that we do. Determinism is thus an unlivable view. It presents a real problem not just for Calvinists, but for the naturalist, insofar as naturalism implies that all our thoughts and actions are determined by natural causes outside ourselves. Free will is an illusion. But we cannot escape this illusion and so must go on making choices even though we had free will. Even though we don't, naturalism is thus an unlivable worldview. Now, that's how it seems to me. And that's all I'm going to do for this particular one. That's the only expert you're going to see. The next is just going to be me and my dumb self. But you can see how that's the point. You can say determinism is true. No one can live like determinism is true. And if no one's living like determinism is true, maybe you're an extra large. That's how it seems to me. You're not a small, you're probably an extra large. Strong materialists say that everything observable is an illusion. Let me do that again. My reading. Strong materialists say that everything unobservable is an illusion. That only leaves particles and energy. If you don't believe that, then you're stuck with Descartes' I think, therefore I am. Okay. Just a word on Descartes and the I think, therefore I am. That's a brilliant idea. Listen, I know it doesn't have all the sciencey sounding words like supervene and all that stuff. It doesn't have these technical, ideas that, this is true, but you got to act like it's a pretty straightforward idea. I think, therefore I am. And you get both. You get the immaterial and the material. Now, unlike the way Trevor puts it there. It's a bit of a straw man, which is nothing wrong with that. Listen, I do straw man arguments all day. It's fun. I enjoy it. But unfortunately, they're also pretty easy to like. Descartes' idea of the I think, there I am, very deep idea. And many people since that time have built upon it and made it a much stronger idea. But here's the cool thing about it. It explains the immaterial and it explains the material. And there's no made up fabricated words that are necessary to deal with the world as everybody thinks it is. And you can say it's true and you can act like it's true. No noble lie like Sean Carroll likes to put out, where you have to pretend that it's not true. Just don't have to do it. So listen, maybe Descartes' I think therefore I am isn't good enough for Trevor. It's good enough for me. Lastly, you talk about the truth, and I don't get your argument at all. Even unconscious computer systems can uncover the truth about the universe and, from observations. Now, I'm not quite sure that's the case. It seems to me the computer knows nothing about truth. It seems to me that any assignation, can I use that? Any truth value that we assign to anything that we get from the computer, that happens in the mind. The mind knows the truth. The computer doesn't know the truth. When I type in 5 plus 5 equals 10, or I don't type that, but if I get the answer equals 10 when I type in 5 plus 5, truth, the computer doesn't know that that's truth. It knows that based on its programming, when I put that in, that's what it's supposed to do. It doesn't even know that, it just does that. So the concept of knowing or discovering truth, only a mind can do that. Immaterial matter cannot do that. So while we use computers to discover true things about the world, none of those computers know whether anything that we're looking at is true or false. None of them. We get the information, then we assign a truth value to that information. But I think you're wrong there. I don't think computers at all know what truth or false is. And finally, he says, check out The Big Picture by Sean Carroll to get a much better view of the materialist point of view than you'll get from YouTube video. That's fine. All right, Trev, I got you. Listen, I mean that. Trevor, Andrew, I appreciate your comments. They're very thoughtful, well thought out comments. We didn't hit 100% agreement, but I do think, Trevor, you did correct me on my characterization of materialists in general. Maybe all materialists, maybe there are no materialists who don't believe that the mind exists. I think there are some that are, at least deny the existence of the mind and that everything's a brain function. I think Daniel Dennett, Dawkins, and Sam Harris would fall in that category. Maybe not Harris. Listen, it's just your brain doing stuff, and everything else is an illusion. So I think there are some materialists or naturalists who fall into that. But maybe you're right. Maybe all of them do. I'm not going to fight you on that point. But regardless, I appreciate your comments. And anybody, if I ever say anything that you think is wrong or I'm not getting all the information right, listen, I'm not going to be mad at you. I appreciate that. I'm not going to bang on you or anything like that or make you feel bad. Although that last comment, I don't know if you can see that here. There's one right at the bottom under this that I didn't get to that we didn't cover here. This is at the very bottom. It says, what is it? Salted cuts. It says, get over it. She's correct. So, listen, not all the comments are as thoughtful as Andrew and Trevor, but listen, it's all good. As a matter of fact, I think that's Sabine, that last one, Salted Cuts. I wonder if that's her, she's got a fake account. That sounds a lot like something Sabine would say, but I'm just joking. Look, and I mean this, I'm not going to hurt my feelings. I appreciate the comments. Please continue to add them on there, especially if you think I'm going wrong. But encouraging ones are nice too, but who gives a rip? Here's how it seems to me. And this is just a general idea of this materialism, determinism thing. Well, just the materialism, not necessarily determinism. The bottom line with determinism, for me, and why I think it's just not a good enough explanation for all the reality is this. There are contingent things, and then there are necessary things. The necessary things exist and in some way don't call for an explanation necessarily. I'm not sure about that case. Don't quote me on that one. But there are things that exist necessarily, and then there are things that exist contingently. To get a complete understanding of the contingent thing, you cannot understand it by looking only at the thing itself. So for example, if I'm looking at my cup here, there's a lot I can learn from the physics. The material, the weight, density, all those things, physics can tell me all kinds of cool things about it. If I look at my car, it's a wonderful marvel of technology, physics and all those things. It's fantastic. But here are the two things that I could never learn. Why there are cars and coffee cups in the first place. I could never learn that by looking at the coffee cup itself. I could never learn why there are cars in the first place just by studying the car alone. Here's another thing I could never figure out. For my car, why is it in one place rather than another place? If you saw my car at 7-Eleven, just studying the car, you could take it apart and rip it all apart and know everything about the car. But you wouldn't know why it's at 7-Eleven and not in my driveway. To understand everything there is to know about a car, you have to appeal to something other than the car. And at some point, if you want to know why there's cars at all, and if you want to know why my car is not in my driveway, but instead of at 7-Eleven, you're going to have to appeal to an individual with intelligence who has purpose and ability. Somebody's going to have the ability, intelligence, and purpose to create cars in the first place. And if you cancel that out as a possible explanation, then you'll never know why the car is there at all. And if somebody does go, well, there's probably somebody who made the car who's intelligent, has the ability to make a car, and has a purpose for making a car, and you scream, oh boy, car builder of the gaps, I think you're making a mistake. Because there has to be some explanation for it outside of the thing. If you see my car parked at 7-Eleven and you want to know why my car's at 7-Eleven, I don't think the car is going to tell you. There has to be somebody who wanted a Slurpee and has the intelligence enough to drive that car and get a Slurpee. You have to get there somehow. And if that's true for my coffee cup, my cell phone, my computer, no matter how complex and how much technology there is, and they're marvels of technology. If you're going to explain any contingent thing, it seems to me, you're going to have to appeal to something that isn't that contingent thing. And that's why I think materialism will always fail. I don't care what technology you get. I don't care how many years in the future you get. You're never going to explain the physical human thing by using only the human physical thing. That's how it seems to me. And appealing to a mind that directs it, just like you get in your car and tell it where to go, and without you getting in your car and taking it someplace, it's not going anywhere. I think the body's the exact same way. And finally, I'm going to drop something on you that I really didn't want to, because I don't want to get into it necessarily, but I'll tell you what, the more I look into it, I think that this is a killer for materialism, if it's true. But it's not really a Hail Mary kind of a thing, because I'm telling you, it's getting more and more recognition in the scientific community. I think it was like declared a science or something like that just recently. Near-death experience. The NDE thing, man, it's a bone crusher for materialism and determinism and naturalism. I'm telling you. And it's not just, I'm just going to give you a primer. It's crazy. I wish I should get the book. I should have the book. I should put it up here. I'm going to put it up here so you can see the book. You got to read this crazy book. Because listen, even me, back in the day, I'm like, yeah, okay, they've had some weird experience, the lights and going in down the tunnel, all that stuff, fine. I mean, you can't verify anything like that. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, not even my interest, right? You read this book. There's stories now, little kids having the near-death experience. No brain activity. All right? Coming back going, hey, talking about relatives that they've never met. Uncle Sam says, Mom, Uncle Sam said this, you owe him $5 from back in the day. She's like, where'd you see him? She goes, oh, when I was out, I saw Uncle Sam. Never met him. In other words, these incidents are verified by third parties. There's an incident, I probably mentioned it before. The gal got hit by a car. They're trying to operate on her. They can't keep her down. Because she's like, my dad, I just, came back and I was talking to my dad who died. And they go in the waiting room where the family is, and they go, hey, your sister's saying your dad's dead. And they're like, no, we talked to him yesterday, he's fine. So they go back in the operating room, and they go, hey, your family says your dad's fine, just relax, we got to operate. And then she goes, nope, I just saw him in wherever, I don't know, he died. He was telling me how he died. And so she tells the doctor. Doctor goes, hey, goes in the waiting room and goes, call your dad just so we can, because we got to operate, just so she knows you've talked to your dad, everything's fine. They call her dad, dad died. Just like how this woman said. It's nuts. And listen, I don't know what to make of it. I'm not telling you it's all real. It seems like it. All I'm saying, it ain't nothing. It's something. You got somebody in the operating room who can tell you while their brain is dead exactly what the operation is. There's a doctor saying she described the operation so well, she could have given a class on it. And she wasn't a doctor. You got people going, hey, while I was out, the guy in the next room was eating a Snickers. I made the thing up about a Snickers bar. But the doctor goes back, hey, an hour ago, what were you doing? I was having a Snickers. It's nuts. And if this stuff is real, yeah, you can forget about materialism, man. And listen, I don't know. I'm just gonna give you the data. You believe whatever hell you want to believe. I don't care. But I'm telling you, it ain't nothing. It's something. You got to look into it. So, all right, that's enough out of me. I did some yammering. Next week, it's going to be far less of me, and you're just going to be looking at people. I'm going to be reading stuff of all the people who actually know this. Because, again, I'm not here to tell you that it's false. I think it is. I think it's a wacky idea, but what do I know? I'm just an idiot sitting in my room. Trevor and Andrew agree. And I'm just an idiot sitting in my room. My point is this. I'm just going to give you the information. You make your own decision. I want you to be an independent thinker. I think that's good for you. I don't think that you should sit in a class, listen to some professor in an auditorium with some half-baked idea and a bunch of huge technical terms that you haven't heard of before, and then walk out going, well, this must be the way it is because that's what the professor says, and all of the other naturalist professors say that, even though I have to pretend like it's false. I think there's a better way to look at it. Seems to me. And that's all I'm looking at. I encourage you to think for yourself, get all of the information from both sides and even third and fourth sides, whatever sides you can get. Just take a look. And sometimes, like Andrew says, I might be wrong. I did misrepresent possibly. If you can see how you can think that I misrepresented the views of materialists and say that nothing exists or that the mind doesn't exist, and maybe that would have been false. So it's good to have people who disagree with you so they can help you correct your ideas. So that's all. All right, I'm rambling again. Thanks again for watching Uncolored. Please, again, whatever your comments, I love them, and hopefully you don't mind me reading these comments. And I hope I represented Andrew and Trevor well enough. Because I don't want to cause anybody embarrassment. We're all just exchanging ideas, and that's okay. So if you have an idea, please let me know. If you want something that I should be looking into, please make it simple enough that even I can read it, though. I appreciate it. All right, get out of here. That's enough out of me. I'll see you next time.